So this is definitely one of those emotionally charged episodes that people are either going to love or hate. I personally am in the love category, but that's me. The Walking Dead, Season 4, Episode 9, Don't Look Back. Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Dead Nation, and welcome back from our 2.5-month hiatus with no new Walking Dead episodes. And honestly, this was one of those things where I think that no matter what they did in this particular episode, I think that they really would. You're looking to top what actually happened. That's what many people were looking for, something to top what happened in the climactic mid-season finale, and I just don't think that can be done. I think this is really something that, how they structured it, it should have been, that mid-season finale really should have been a season finale, to kind of leave you off for the whole summer and then to go and come back, because really now it's a rebuilding process. The prison is gone, everybody is scattered, and it's fairly hopeless. I mean, when you think about it, so there's not a whole lot that you could have done, in one episode to kind of get rid of that feeling of loss and hopelessness. However, for me, that was the feeling that I enjoyed in the first season, and really for the first couple episodes of the second season, until they got to the safety of the farm and then moved on into the safety of the prison. And really, instead of just kind of doing my usual thing where I go through and I try to break down each and every part, which takes forever, I'm just going to tell you this particular episode is going to have a lot of people talking, and they're either going to love it or hate it. When I first watched it last night, I thought, you know what? It's not my favorite episode, but then as I kind of let it sink in, and, I was watching some other things. I watched The Talking Dead afterwards, and then kind of rewatched some of the episode later on just because it happened to be on the rerun. I thought, you know what? This really was a very good episode for a lot of different things that people have been waiting for. Number one, the episode focuses only on Carl and Rick and Michonne and what happened to them afterwards. Now, even though they were very near each other when everything went down, obviously Michonne, was the one that ran the governor through with her sword and everything else and pretty much saved Rick's life. Somehow or another, they just got separated after that. Now, the whole episode goes back and forth between the two, and you really starts out, and it's a very somber, kind of downtrodden tone, and it's with Rick and Carl, and they're just kind of hobbling down the road away from the prison. Well, Rick is anyway, because he's been beaten to within an inch of his life. Certainly has seen better days. And Carl just kind of has this and it's funny because I have a 13-year-old, so while seeing this whole scene's played out between Carl and Rick, I thought about, number one, a lot of things that Carl said and did. I thought, man, I just want to punch this kid. But then at the same time, I tried to think and put myself in an emotional teenager, 12 or 13-year-old kid's shoes, and how certain things can be taken so literally to them that it really is like the end of the world. You got to remember that this kid for the last few years has grown up without, tablets and Xbox and just all the other normalcies of life that everybody gets used to, the things that make life easier, and the internet and the accessibility of things. And he's lived on the run. His father, who was thought to have been dead, pretty much came back to life and wound up finding him. There was the whole thing between, Shane was obviously kind of like the surrogate father to him, and then eventually at the end of season 2, he sees his father go and kill him, and then he winds up putting a bullet in his head as he rises back up. So Carl has been through a lot. He lost his mother in season 3. Now they presume that Judith, the baby, is dead, his younger sister, so it's really a tough time for a 13-year-old. Let's just put it that way. But anyway, they wind up kind of, Rick is hobbling along, and Carl's walking out in front of him, and he keeps telling him, Carl, wait up, and Carl's basically just like, screw you, He's pissed off at his father because he blames his father for the loss of the prison. He thinks that if his father wasn't being farmer dad, and he was being more of the sheriff in town like he had prior to that, that maybe things wouldn't have went down the way they did, because he's presuming that everybody he knows and loves, or has come to know and love in that prison, is now dead. He doesn't know where Daryl or Glenn or Maggie or any of these other people are. And of course, presuming too now that he lost not only his mom, Shane, and then of course, the baby as well, Judith. So it really is, it's an emotional episode if you look at it for what it's worth. Then it goes and it flips us to Michonne. And as Carl and Rick are kind of going on their journey, they stop at this place looking for supplies, like a little barbecue place or whatever, and then kind of move on. We then see Michonne, and Michonne goes back to the battlefield, and I thought it was a really cool thing the way it was portrayed. She goes back, and there's zombies everywhere now, right? And she's kind of hiding in the tall grass, sort of just walking, looking, and she winds up finding Hershel's decapitated head. And although it was a very powerful, disturbing scene to see the man's head because everybody liked him, and I know my wife was like getting all teared up and everything else, you know, it's a character, and unfortunately, it was a beloved character that did die. The unfortunate part is that he was killed. But, you know, obviously in that mid-season finale. But she came over, and it was so funny, because after the mid-season finale, I think I even said it in my review, I said, and now we get to, poor Hershel's head gets to roll around the empty prison yard. It's getting overrun by zombies, reanimated for the next 2 or 3 months. Well, she wound up putting that to rest. She came over and put her foot on it, put her sword through the side of his head, and then pulled it out. And then you can kind of see that she's withdrawn. She was withdrawn to begin with, but then she warmed up to Andrea a little bit, and then she started to warm up to some of the other inner circle and group, and really kind of seeing this whole thing, and now she's back again. So she winds up luring a couple of zombies over to the kind of fences that they had set up, you know, with the spikes where the zombies had impaled themselves on it, and she starts lopping off arms and we presume pulling out teeth, and the next thing you know, she's got 2 leashed pets again. The cool thing about this episode, though, that I enjoyed is during the course of the episode, we wind up actually seeing a flashback. And in Walking Dead, they only have done a couple of those, and they've been very brief, and they've all taken place right before or right after the actual outbreak. And to me, I would like to see more of those with some of the characters to see, like, what was going through your mind. How were you before the fall of mankind, you know? But anyway, we see this really cool flashback that's done very well, and it's like a flashback / nightmare, because she's so withdrawn now. We wind up seeing that she's holding a child in there, so now we know where that whole, like, being scared of the crying baby came from back earlier in the season. She obviously had a baby herself, and she's in this kitchen, and she's talking with what we presume to be her husband. He's introduced as her lover, but we presume the baby daddy, whatever, and maybe a friend of his, maybe his brother. I'm not really quite sure, but 2 other gentlemen that are sitting there talking, and they're talking about what they're going to do, where they're going to go. And as the scene goes on, for those of you that didn't pay attention to it, everything around in the kitchen, at first when you look out the window, you can see Atlanta, and everything's good. And then as the scene progresses, you see like Atlanta just kind of like pretty much, you know, smoldered, burned to the ground type of thing after the apocalypse. So this is supposed to represent like just how everything goes and progresses, and the erosion of her dream into a nightmare that is now her reality. At some point in the dream, she looks down and the baby's no longer there that she was holding earlier. She actually takes her sword out and puts it in a butcher block, like in the kitchen butcher block, so it's really kind of this weird, trippy sort of dream, but it is neat to see her background and her past, and then you can tell that those original 2 pets that she had were actually these two guys that were introduced in there, and obviously something must have happened to them, because I think it was one of those things where, like, the world ended and some people were kind of useless and some people kind of, like, rose to the occasion, and the strong will survive. People that have skills like Glenn, where he could go and sneak in and out of places, pizza delivery guy, he was a useful guy, you know. Same thing with Michonne. She learned how to use a sword, or maybe she had an affiliation for swords. Prior to that, I don't know, you know what I mean? But the point is it was a very, very well done scene, I think. It really captured the essence of Michonne and her journey. And it's cool because as you see this go back and forth and we go back to her, she's eventually going and she's walking along and she sees the footprints of Rick and Carl, so she could actually go and track them, and she chooses to continue on, and she's just kind of walking her own path through the forest with these 2 pet zombies. And as this the show progresses, the episode, you see at different times there's more and more zombies that have kind of almost like a small herd, 20, 30 of them that are starting to follow around. They're just kind of hanging out with the other ones, and we know that if you keep the other ones close to you, it kind of gives you a natural camouflage to these other ones, and they don't seem to attack. And eventually there was this great point where, to me, it was like she was so far gone from reality, she was going down the rabbit hole, right? And she was just not going to come back, kind of like Rick had withdrawn after Lori had died in season 3. And that's kind of what I got from it. And then all of a sudden, she just goes and flips her shit, man. And she cannot deal. There's this one zombie that looks kind of like her. It's got the dreadlocks and everything. It's kind of following along with her the whole time. And eventually, she just, like, loses it, man. And she pulls out her sword. And in one of the coolest action scenes I've ever seen, she goes and just takes out, like, mercilessly, like, 25, 30 zombies. No shitting. And I mean, just, hacking heads off and everything else. And winds up killing her 2 pets that she had, you know. So I think that was her way of snapping out of it and saying, you know what, I don't need to do this again. Because when she found Andrea, that's how she was. She was alone. She had these 2 pets with her that obviously were, people that had turned that she cared for, and she was very withdrawn. So I think this was her way of saying no and climbing out of the rabbit hole and saying, no, I'm not going back down in there. So she goes back to the road and actually follows the footprints and goes and kind of picks up on that journey. The other side of the episode is the whole thing between Rick and Carl. They wind up getting to this house. Carl is not listening to Rick as he's clearing rooms, and he starts swearing like a sailor and basically just has no respect for his father. His father they push a couch against the front door, tie the front door. Rick passes out from his wounds. He's just unconscious. There's a point where Carl goes out. He goes to do some things. He lures a few zombies away from the house, and he almost gets killed. And he winds up coming out on top. He's okay, throws up afterwards. But then he comes back, and he's talking to his unconscious father, right? And he's just like, I don't need you anymore. It's all your fault. And there was this one point, too, where Rick said something to him, and he's like, where'd you learn that? And he's like, Shane, remember him? And then Rick went and put him in his place. He's like, yeah, boy, I remember him every day. So this was Carl's way of basically, he's hurt and he wants to blame somebody. He's lost his mother. He's lost all the people that he knows and loves, his whole livelihood, and had to grow up in this apocalypse. So anyway, Rick is passed out while he's yelling at him and telling him, I don't need you anymore and I hate you. And so he kind of has this idea of like he can be cool out on his own, right? So he just goes walking along through the neighborhood, winds up going to this other house to look for some supplies and whatnot, finds himself a big old thing of pudding, and he's all excited about that because everybody loved pudding, as Bill Cosby would say. And anyway, he winds up having this encounter with a zombie that kind of came out of nowhere, and he ran out of bullets. He got scared. The end result was that the zombie winds up pulling his shoe off, but he winds up trapping it in this room, and he winds up just sitting there. He scrolls on the thing, zombie inside, didn't get me, got my shoe, And he writes it on there, so if anybody else comes along, they can see that, know that there's a zombie still alive in there. So he winds up sitting out, though, on the roof, eating this big old 112-ounce can of, like, one of those big industrial-sized cans of pudding, right? That they get for, like, restaurant stuff. And he's just eating it. Just being a kid, man. Just thinking about and just enjoying the rush of sugar that comes with the sugar high and the chocolate from the pudding. And really kind of thinking back on his life and realizing that, you know what? My father has always tried to put his life on the line to make sure that mine's okay. So I don't hate him as much as I think. And I also need him more than I think, too. And that's what I got from that, was that I can't make it alone. This is bullshit. Because then he winds up going and coming back to the house before the episode ends, and there's actually a point where Rick kind of goes and falls off the couch, and he's breathing like a zombie almost, and Carl's going to pull his gun out, and his hand is shaking, and he can't do it. He can't shoot him. And thank God, because I was thinking, oh my God, did they really just kill Rick? Because Rick was just breathing heavy because of his wounds, but he was trying to tell Carl as Carl started crying and saying, no, and I can't do this and this and that. And he's like, it's okay, Carl. Don't go outside, just stay here, right? And so I thought it was really kind of a cool, touching moment, because it was that moment that I think all kids go through probably at some point, where you feel like you hate your parents for whatever reason, or something that they've said, something that they've done. And really, it was kind of him going and realizing that, no, I don't really hate him. I needed someone to direct my hatred towards, and this was the easiest person to do it, because we always shit on the ones we love the most. But really, at the end of the day, it was kind of neat to go and see him come to that realization of, like, you know what, I can be the biggest badass kid in the world, but I still need my father, and he's the only person left alive that's close to me, So I thought it was very cool. The episode winds up ending up shortly after. So there was a number of different things I thought that were great, as far as Michonne kind of going on her journey and going to the edge, the brink of madness, and just standing over the edge and about to fall in, and then coming back and saying, no, I want to be around these people. I want to go and have people in my life. You know what I mean? And really, for me, too, this episode was pretty much like, I was upset because they didn't show all the other survivors, and it looks like next week's episode is going to be like the other, groups of survivors with Daryl and Maggie and all them and everything. But the main thing for me was that this was a good episode to show, like, what are we really living for? I mean, a lot of people just decided to go and check out after this happened, and I can see why. I mean, you think about it. Everything's in ruins, desolation. Everybody you love at one point or another has gotten hurt, bitten, killed, whatever, right? In some kind of vicious way. this poor kid's lost his mother, somebody who was kind of like a surrogate father / uncle, whatever, and that was a whole different story. And then his younger sister that he saw born into this whole thing, that he saw his mother die for to have. Or at least they think that she's dead. I know she's not. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. And then just the whole feeling of hopelessness and loss, and just, I actually felt scared for him when he was sitting there at night when his father was passed out from his wounds. He couldn't get up. And he's sitting in this dark house, this creepy-ass house, alone. They've already cleared it, and everything else. But, it's just, he's a kid, man. You got to be scared. You got to be able to have some time to mourn, to be scared, to be upset. And that's really what we saw in this episode. So, definitely very good for me. My question for you, though, brothers and sisters, is what are your thoughts on I guess 2 things. What are your thoughts on Michonne and kind of going almost to the dark side, almost to the brink of madness, and then coming back and choosing life? And what are your thoughts on Carl and Rick and their interactions, and Carl, just kind of being a really pretty much like a little dick to his father, but then kind of going and coming to the realization and coming back and saying, hey, you know what? No, I really do love you, and I really do need you, and you really have put everything out there for me, So leave your answer to that question in the comments down below. The episode, did end up with, I thought, a very cool moment, because Michonne had been tracking, of course, them going this back and forth throughout the thing, and then at the end of the episode, you wind up seeing her walking down the street. She sees the can of pudding, and he even tells his dad he had more food, but I ate it, again, and Rick says, what? And he says, 112 ounces of pudding, chocolate pudding, But so that she's coming soon. Then all of a sudden they're sitting in there, right? And all of a sudden Michonne looks in through the window and sees him. She just starts crying. And it was just a great touching moment, because she's just like, oh, they're alive, right? And then she goes over and knocks on the front door, and Rick goes and he's looked through the peephole, and he comes down. And Michonne and Carl had gotten kind of close, she had been bringing him comics and stuff like that, and it seems like they're buddies now. And he goes and looks at Carl, and the episode ends with him going, I think it's for you. So definitely very cool stuff. Remember to feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and we'll look forward to catching you in the next one, nation. This was a portrait I drew of Chandler Riggs, who plays Carl Grimes, obviously, and did it some time ago, but thought it was a good one considering the content of this episode. So if you like this and more, go over to my Facebook and Instagram page, and you can see more like it.